All right, this is going to be kind of a continuation of my last video with BSBT and Wolvie. And we have another Michigan soft sit who tries to run the same script or ideas in court, files a motion to dismiss, challenging everything. And this judge does an excellent job of breaking down this motion to dismiss, addressing every element that this offset brings up, which are pretty much the standard stuff: right to travel, jurisdiction. So I've cut a lot of it out because it runs to about 40 minutes, and he talks about a lot of the things you all have heard, and he also has an issue with his moped. He's the standard traffic: no license, no tag, no insurance, no registration. And his moped, of course, got towed, and he didn't think that was right. But I've culled everything down to, I think, the interesting things, especially the judge breaking down the motion to dismiss. So I hope BSBT and Wolvie will watch this, as any soft sit should, and learn. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
This is your motion, sir. Go ahead.
Well, have you read the motion already? Right. Well, just first I want to say on the so-called charge against me, I am entering a special appearance. Okay, that is in no way a general jurisdictional granting appearance. I challenge the jurisdiction of this court. Their contract that I have knowingly, willingly, and voluntarily entered into with this court that grants any jurisdictional authority over me as a living man. If there's any such contract with the court, I demand the court present it. Also want to say I'm here by threat and duress. I'm not here willingly. Like I said, threatened arrest, the normal. If you don't show up, arrest warrant, etc. Now in response to let the state. So again, it's based on my right to private property, my due process, which is in the due process of the Michigan Constitution. No state law that they are trying to use have wrote up about it justified my Constitution. And to do is try to use state statute, unconstitutional state statute law, but that doesn't justify my private property. Why it didn't justify depriving me of it then, and not continuing to deprive me of it now. And there's no injured party now in the case. I want to mention that too. So the plaintiff has no standing against these so-called criminal charges. There's no standing because there's no injured party. And I have a U.S. Supreme Court case on that, so I'll move to dismiss the case on that.
I've heard from both parties. Mr. Greco, was there anything further?
No.
So, Mr. Martin, through your oral argument and written briefs, you've raised a couple of issues. So let me address those seemingly in the order in which you raised them. So first off, let's talk about jurisdiction. Now, you argue that this court lacks jurisdiction over you.
Yeah.
Now, the question of whether a court has personal jurisdiction over a party is a question of law. And that can be stated in Poindexter versus Poindexter, and that's 234 Mishap 316, 1999.
And just a note here, you notice he said jurisdiction is a matter of law, so he looks to the law to determine if he has jurisdiction.
Typically, a plaintiff bears the burden of establishing jurisdiction over a defendant. However, a plaintiff here, the prosecution, only needs to make a prima facie showing of jurisdiction in order to defeat any motion to dismiss.
I hope BSBT heard that a prima facie case.
based on a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. That can be found in Jeffrey versus Rapid American 448, Mish 178, 1995. Before a court can obligate a party to comply with its orders or proceed to trial or do any of these proceedings, the court must have personal jurisdiction over a party. And I think we all agree that that's true. Jurisdiction over a person may be established by a couple of ways: by way of general personal jurisdiction or specific or limited personal jurisdiction.
I'm sure you will all remember from my last video, we covered what the judge just spoke of, and that is the general personal jurisdiction over individuals in Michigan. So there they are again. And of course, the bottom one, the 705, limited personal jurisdiction over individuals, was what Wolvie was hammering and rapidly yelling about, which was incorrect, as I said, and this judge says. So,
Matter of fact, Michigan has two different statutes: a general jurisdiction statute and a specific jurisdiction or limited jurisdiction statute. So exercise of general jurisdiction is possible anytime that the defendant comes in contact with the forum state or the forum city or the forum body of government in such a way that the nature and quality are to enable a court to adjudicate any action against the defendant, even when the claim at issue does not arise out of contracts or, with the forum. Here, and if we look at the Michigan General Jurisdiction Statute, which is MCL 600.701, basically it states that the existence of any of the following relationships between an individual and the state shall constitute a sufficient basis of jurisdiction to enable the courts of record of the state to exercise general personal jurisdiction over the individual or his representative, and to enable such courts to render personal judgments against the individual or representative. And they point to three things specifically that I want to raise. One, presence in the governmental unit or city at the time when process is served, domicile in the city, and consent. Now, in the present case, Mr. Martin was physically within the boundaries of the city of Taylor at the time of the alleged criminal activity. When he was served with the ticket, the complaint. Second, Mr. Martin is also domiciled in the city of Taylor, which means he lives in the city of Taylor. The city of Taylor has ordinances regarding basically everything that the state does, and one of those is that you have to drive with a license. So I do find that there is personal jurisdiction over you. You availed yourself of the use of the streets here in Taylor. You live in Taylor and you were served in Taylor. Therefore, you fall under the jurisdiction of the Taylor Court here, which is the 23rd District Court. As for standing, now standing is a legal term that people like to throw around, and well, you don't have standing. Standing is a legal term which basically determines whether the party can bring a lawsuit or has a right to do so. Standing is not about the issues. It's about who is bringing the lawsuit and whether they have a legal right to sue. So if you are suing your government, if you have no damage, if you have no harm done to you, why are you bringing a lawsuit? Here, this isn't about harm. This isn't about a civil suit. This isn't for some violation of rights. This isn't a claim for money damages because you weren't allowed to live where you want to live or marry who you want to marry or some other form of federal type of a situation that's a constitutional based or a tort based thing. This is a governmental unit doing their job under the Constitution to enforce the laws of their cities and states. The standing that they have is that they can show by preponderance of the evidence, they can show that there is probable cause that there was a crime committed and that you committed the crime in the city of Taylor. That's all they need for standing. That's all they need is that, and along with personal jurisdiction. We've already established that there's personal jurisdiction. So as to your standing argument, there is no standing argument there. Now that brings us to our last point about the fact that you think that there's an underlying reason why this should just be dismissed outright. Just a general dismissal because you have a right to travel. You do have a right to travel. Matter of fact, the right to travel is a fundamental right. And we can freely use the roads, since why? Well, they're funded by tax dollars. However, the privilege to drive a vehicle can be conditionally granted even, based upon being licensed, based on following the laws that are set forth by the government. Driving is a privilege that a state can prohibit if they consider it. You do not have a constitutional right to drive a vehicle. You have a right, you can walk your happy self all over the state. You can Forrest Gump that thing all the way from one end of the country to the other. You can go ahead and jog your way back and then back again. You can't drive a vehicle if you don't have a license. I'm going to go to Florida. I'll give you a free, how about if I am, let's just say a hypothetical, I'm going to give you a free trip to Florida, Mr. Martin. All expense paid, and there's no air fees, because I have a private jet. But I'm the pilot. You gonna fly with me? I've never even taken a class about flying a plane. Don't even have a pilot's license. But you know what? I got a right to travel. I'll fly a plane if I want to. Does that make any sense? No. Why? Because planes can crash and kill people. Planes can crash and kill people. Cars can kill people. We want to make sure people are licensed to drive vehicles. Why? Because you're interacting with other vehicles that weigh thousands of pounds that are moving at rates of speed 30 miles an hour and higher. There's literally a National Traffic Safety Administration. Why? Because it's a dangerous situation. Yes, we need it, and yes, it's necessary. But because of that, the driving privilege can be revoked. The right to drive a motor vehicle can be revoked. The right to have, trust me, I'm the most firm believer in the right to keep and bear arms. But if you're not mentally in the right state of mind, or if there's some sort of reason why everyone has agreed that, you know what, this guy should not be having any weapons. He's threatening to kill himself. You know what, for his own safety, let's get the weapons out of his hand. Now, the reason we have weapons, it isn't so we can go hunting. It's so we can protect ourselves against the usurpation by our despotic government of any of our rights. I get that. I understand that. But at the same time, I'm not going to fly in a plane with a pilot who's never even taken a class, doesn't have a license. And that's why driving is a privilege. It's based on the character and nature of the activity. Yes, you can travel. You can ride a bike. You can pedal yourself around. You can walk anywhere you want to. You don't need to show your papers when you go from Michigan down to Ohio. Your papers, please. This isn't Russia. But you can't drive if you don't have a license, if that state requires it. And so, based on all of those things, based on the oral arguments that were presented today by both sides, based on the written briefs and answers to the same, I am denying your motion to dismiss. And I am denying your motion for the return of the moped.
Well, I don't know how anybody could make it simpler. I think even BS and BT may have been able to understand that. I hope this guy listened. If you noticed, and you may not have noticed, but while the judge was really explaining everything, he was thumbing through his papers. He was like, I got to find something that shows him wrong or something. I don't know. I hope he listened. If he didn't listen, I hope he has listened to the video again. Maybe even listen to this one. But I'm glad you dropped in for the view. Like and subscribe if you would. And I'll see you next time. Thanks again.